Intercompany billing allows companies within a large organization to settle invoices with each other. This presentation covers the basic steps to set up this module and walks through the intercompany billing example in the journal entries created by the system. Steve, you know what, if you can hit record, I'm sorry I didn't give you the heads up, but if we can start recording.
I'm recording now.
Okay. And before we get started, if you're not familiar with bills, I'd like to take a second to tell you a little bit about us. So Steve, if we could just move to the next slide. We have been in the Infor ecosystem for over 26 years. We are entirely Infor focused. We do nothing but Infor implementations, upgrades, and managed services. We support all aspects of the technology, including S3, Landmark, CloudSuite, including HRM, HCM, FN, and SCM. In fact, we have been recognized and given partnering awards in 8 of the last 10 years. Bills is also one of the only women-owned business supporting the Infor, S3, and Landmark products, which we're very proud of. Our consultants bring 15 plus years of consulting experience in this space and the equivalent in professional experience. Some were former benefit managers, compensation managers, directors of supply chain, as well as former controllers and CFOs. Again, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. Let me introduce your presenters. We have Steve Sidisi, one of our senior financial consultants, and Lisa Watkins is joining our call, our financial practice manager. So Steve, with that, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Brian, and thank you everyone for getting on the call today. We're going to go over an introduction to the intercompany billing module. I think this is a kind of an underutilized module in CloudSuite Financials. It's delivered with CloudSuite Financials, and I hope to give everyone a good introduction to the functionality of this tool, what's required to set up, and some of the setup considerations that are involved. So what is intercompany billing? It's a delivered module with CloudSuite Financials, and it lets companies within an organization create and settle invoices with each other. The basic process flow for using intercompany billing is the creation of an intercompany billing document, approval of that document, which is optional. There is a delivered approval flow. We'll talk about a little bit more here coming up. After that intercompany billing document is created, the system automatically interfaces a payable and receivables invoice into the respective companies. And that's really where you're getting efficiency with this module, is you're going from the intercompany billing module, creating one document, and it's creating the payables and receivable invoice automatically for you. It's also going to work out some of the intercompany accounting, which we'll look at the journal entries here in this presentation. And then it allows you to create a settlement within intercompany billing that applies payment between the two companies. There's one main role for the module called the Intercompany Billing Specialist, and that's going to be where your users get into the intercompany billing module, where they can do most of the intercompany billing functionality. So this slide shows the other modules that intercompany billing works with, the main ones being the general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and the cash ledger. There's also a submodule called transfer pricing. We'll touch on that at the end. That's essentially takes data out of the general ledger, allows you to create a cost allocation, and then bill other companies within the organization. The other piece is this web service piece, where you could interface billing documents into intercompany billing from a third party. Functionality in intercompany billing to support that out of the box. So I want to walk through the prerequisite setup. So everything that needs to be done before you can start building out the intercompany billing module. And there's some setup on the GL side. The first thing you have to have is accounting entity or company relations. So these have to exist between any of the companies that you want to do billing in between. And it's easy setup. It's just that has to be done before you can move forward at all with the setup. There are some system accounts specific to intercompany billing. They are the intercompany billing clearing account and the intercompany billing clearing expense account. So those have to get created on the GL side. And then on the GL company, there's a flag for intercompany billing. So you just have to check that flag. You've got your GL portion set up and ready to go. On the accounts receivable side, the companies that are going to do intercompany billing need to be set up as customers. And you need to tie that customer to the company that's doing intercompany billing. So on this screen, you can see I've got a company, Steve's Barbecue, and I have a customer set up called Steve's Barbecue. So that's going to allow the intercompany billing process to take place. That has to be done for each company that you want to have intercompany billing for. Then when you create the company customer in AR, you have to flag the customer for automatic cash application. That's going to be how you clear the receivable invoice. Work through that later in the process. Then on the receivable companies, you'll see a tab for intercompany billing, and it's going to have a bunch of defaults that need to be defined at the receivable company level. You can override these defaults later in the process when you create billing documents, but you need to define a first level first. So you can see where you define an invoice template. We'll look at these a little bit later as well. This is going to be like a printable document that gets created in the system. You have a couple options there. You have to define a prefix on your receivable invoices. So here I've set it to IC for intercompany, but you could put any prefix there that you want. A prefix for credit memos and reason codes, and then your settlement default. So what bank account is going to, what receivable code do you want to use, and any bank fee codes. Setup on the payable side is very similar to the receivable side. Here, the companies need to be set up as vendors in payables if they're not already. And then they need to have a couple special features. They need to be on a permanent hold code, and that's going to play into this process that we're going to look at. And they cannot be associated with another intercompany billing enabled payables company. So it needs to be a one-to-one relationship between payables company and vendor. Again, on the company, this is the payables company. There's an intercompany billing tab that needs to be completed. So this has a default similar to the receivables company, your billing document, tying your vendor to the company, and then again, settlement defaults for the bank account, bank transaction code, and any bank fee codes. So now that you've got the subsystems prerequisite setup done, you can actually start building out the intercompany module. So this is where you go into that intercompany billing specialist role. And the first thing you do is create an intercompany billing group. All of the companies are going to operate underneath that intercompany billing group. So your organization will have one intercompany billing group. And then there are some fields you can select here, whether you want to use the expense clearing system account. And what that's going to do is we're going to look at the items you can put on intercompany billing invoices. And if you select these checkboxes up top here, it'll override the expense account with this clearing system account. And then you have the ability to automatically release documents when they're created from payables, journal entries, transfer pricing. If you don't select these checkboxes, they're going to come through created as unreleased. And that's going to give a user the ability to check them and send them off for approval or manually release them instead of having them get automatically released and created. You can require a company currency on the invoice. And then you can use IDM templates. So this is Infor document management templates. These are delivered with the system, and they are customizable templates for billing documents. So if you wanted to change the way that the invoice looked. And we'll take a look at a standard example here that's delivered with the system. But these IDM templates allow you to pretty much customize them any way you want, put logos and graphics on them, that kind of a thing. So after your intercompany billing group is defined, you need to create unit of measures for doing the billing documents, and these are specific to intercompany billing. So these are not shared with supply chain management or the regular billing module. Now you could take a copy of those and upload them into intercompany billing and use the same ones that you're using elsewhere in the system, but these are unique to intercompany billing. So you can see here, I've just done a couple quick examples of each unit of measure in an hour. So then you need to define recharge items. These are the items that you're going to select on the invoice. These are going to become your invoice lines between the companies. So for any goods or services that you're billing between companies, you're going to need to have a recharge item set up. And these are also unique to intercompany billing. So these are not shared with your items in supply chain. So these all need to be created. You can see on the screen, I've done an example of a recharge item for legal services. I've selected the type of services, and I've identified where it's going to hit in the GL on the receivable side, so my revenue account, and then on the payable side, the legal expense account for company 2. Next, you can define approval codes. So again, these are optional, but this is a delivered process flow in the system. It would allow you, for when a user creates an intercompany billing document, to send it off for approval. So for management level or whatever level approval you need, you can create as many levels here as you want. So you could have a manager needs to approve it, and then a vice president needs to approve it. You can have as many levels here as you want, and in each level, you can define either an individual user in the system, or you can create teams of users where anyone in that team could approve the document. Out of the box, that's kind of what you are limited to creating. You can customize these process flows if you need to make it based on amount or department, or you have some more complex flows for the approval process. But this is kind of what's available to you just out of the box. And again, you do not need to use an approval flow to release the billing document. Optional. So on this screen, we look finally at a intercompany billing document that a user would create. So they would need that intercompany billing specialist role. They would go to this intercompany billing document area, create the document, and they're going to identify the receivable company and the payable company, as well as the date, the description, template they're going to use, all that kind of stuff. So again, the benefit here is that you have one user creating this billing document, and when they release it, it's automatically creating the receivable invoice and the payable invoice for the respective companies. So instead of the receivable department at Steve's Barbecue having to create the AR invoice, and the payable company at Steve's Pizza over here, company 2, creating the payable invoice, one user's done this from one spot in the system. And then you've always got a place to go back and see all of your intercompany billings. So that's kind of the header level detail that needs to be filled out. And once that's created, you create the invoice lines. So you can have as many lines on here as you need. I've just created one line for legal services for $2,500. And once that line is on there, the user would either release the billing document, and when they release that, that's the system's cue to automatically create the payable invoice and the receivable invoice in the system. Or if you have approvals required, they would submit this for approval, and whatever users are identified as approve this document, it would go to their inbox and they would have to approve it and accept this document before those invoices got created. Once you've created the lines on the billing document, you're going to have a hyperlink on the main tab to see what the invoice looks like, to get a printable copy of the invoice. So the system will store these, but you'll always be able to go back and pull up one of these documents to print for auditors or to send to one of the companies as a source of record. And this is that standard template I was talking about. This is just kind of using the standard template that's delivered. You could customize this. This one hasn't been touched at all. So you could make these look nice if that's important to your organization. So again, once that intercompany billing document was released, the system has created a release payable invoice automatically. You can see it's stamped it with an invoice number, IC4. There's that IC prefix that we set up earlier. And it's showing me that the payables company, Steve's Pizza, owes Steve's Barbecue $2,500. So no one in payables had to create this invoice. No job needed to be run. We just needed to release the intercompany document. And then that created a journal entry on the payable side. That's going to be a credit to the AP accrual liability and a debit to legal expenses for Steve's Pizza. And this got created within the payables module. So this just needs to be journalized from the payable side to get into the GL. And at the same time that that AP invoice was created, the system also created the receivable invoice on Steve's Barbecue side, which is saying that Steve's Pizza owes us $2,500. Again, no job needed to be run. The system created this automatically. And the invoice on the receivable side created a journal entry that's going to be a credit to revenue and a debit to accounts receivable. Again, that just needs to be journalized to get over to the GL. So you've got your receivable invoice and your payable invoice now sitting out in the system. And remember that the vendor for the payables invoice is on a permanent hold. So our payables department doesn't do anything to pay that invoice. It's on a hold. It's waiting for this intercompany billing settlement process to take place to clear out that invoice. So it's not going to end up on a check run. That's not going to end up getting accidentally processed by an AP department. Someone's going to have to go in as an intercompany billing specialist and create a settlement between the two companies. So the settlement is the payment of that invoice. And on the settlement side, you'll see in a second, we're going to put a settlement number on there. We're going to say how much the settlement was for, and we're going to be able to select one or multiple invoices that are being settled. And this whole process is assuming that you are transferring funds between these companies outside of CSF at your bank. You're not creating a check in Infor and sending a physical check from one company to another. It's assuming that you're doing a wire transfer or something like that between your companies, and that you are now going into intercompany billing and you are putting that wire transfer number or payment number into the system and doing the accounting for that transfer of funds. So on this screen, we are showing an intercompany billing settlement, and you can see where that settlement ID is. That's going to become the payment number on the AP invoice and on the cash book side. So I've put in a settlement ID, a payment date, and the payment amount, and identified who's paying and who's receiving the money. Once that information is in, it's going to let me select what documents are available to be settled. So in this example, I'm settling one invoice completely for the $2,500. You could just as easily select multiple invoices that you're settling at one time, or you can partially settle invoices. So you could do partial payment and come back later to fully settle the invoice. So once that settlement is created and released, the payment details get applied to the payables invoice. So that's where that settlement ID or that payment number is showing up here on the payable side. And it's saying that we paid this invoice $2,500 and it applied the payment date. And this is the process here at this point is kind of similar to a manual payment. Any folks are doing that in your current system, where the next time that a payment close job is run, it's going to move that invoice from a release status to a historical status. So it's got the payment detail applied. You just have to run that payment close job to move it kind of out of your release bucket into your historical invoice bucket. And that also is the trigger in the system to post the following journal entry, which is going to relieve the payables accrual account, and it's going to credit cash since you've paid the invoice now. And when that payment close was run on the AP side, it's now triggered the cash to come over to the receivable side. So the receivable company is now getting a debit to cash, and it's crediting receive not applied because it's not applied that cash to a specific receivable invoice yet. But that's going to be the next step here, which is running that automatic cash application, which is required piece of this intercompany billing process. That's going to match the cash application to the receivable invoice or invoices, in this case just the one, and it's going to trigger an entry to debit receive not applied, clear that out, and credit the AR account. So that's now done all of the journal entries that you need to. It's taken cash from one company, hit to another, hit the correct expense account, hit the right receivable accounts, and cleared everything out. And that's kind of the end of the intercompany billing process when creating it from an intercompany billing document. Now you also have the option to create intercompany billing documents from payables invoices. So this would be like, your company one receives an invoice from an outside vendor and pays it on behalf of company two. Well, there's an option on that invoice where they can say, this is for intercompany billing. Company one is paying it, but now I want to bill company two for the fact that I paid it for them. So this would be done on the payable side, where they would flag the invoice as for intercompany billing. And when they do so, when they fill out the distribution information, they're going to have to fill out a bill to company. So who are they billing this? Which company are they billing this invoice to, since they've already paid it, they're going to pay it? They're going to have to populate a recharge item to charge that company. And you want to make sure that your recharge items are going to clear out system-generated intercompany entries. So the way you set up items for intercompany billing from payables should look different than the way you set up items for intercompany billing where one company has provided goods or services for another company. And then when you release that AP invoice on the payable side, have that checkbox flagged for intercompany billing, it's automatically going to create the intercompany billing document that we did in the last example. Now remember, on the intercompany billing group, we had the option to either have that document come through as released or unreleased. So if we don't have that box checked on the intercompany billing group, document's going to come through unreleased, and that's going to give an intercompany billing specialist the opportunity to review the document, and they could either send it for approval or they could check it themselves and say, yeah, this looks good, I'm going to release it now. This is good for intercompany billing, or hey, there was a mistake here, need to make a change, this really shouldn't be getting billed to another company. You know, that's kind of a checkpoint. Whereas if you have it automatically released, that document's going to come through released. It's going to create the receivables invoice for the other company automatically. So it really just depends on, you know, what process your company wants to implement module there. You also have the option to create intercompany billing documents from journal entries. So similar to a payables invoice, you're going to have an option to flag the journal entry as is it intercompany billing journal. You're going to fill out a bill to company, bill from company, and a recharge item. And when you release that journal entry, that's going to trigger the system to create an intercompany billing document between two companies. So we touched on transfer pricing allocations a little earlier. This is a whole nother piece of setup, and we could probably spend another 20-30 minutes walking through what's required to set this up. But I more wanted to touch on the fact that this is available to you if you're using intercompany billing. Again, it's available out of the box, and it's taking costs that are accumulated in the global ledger and creating an allocation the same way you would create a cost allocation, except instead of just creating journal entries to move costs from one company and splitting it out to others, you would create billing documents. So all the other companies that you're allocating to would actually get a bill, and you would store that information in intercompany billing, and those other companies would have to pay for the services or goods that were allocated to them. So that was a quick walkthrough of an awful lot of setup and functionality. So I want to give some time here for questions and answers if anyone has any questions specific to this intercompany billing module.
I don't know. Do we have any questions for Steve? I don't see them coming through the chat either, Steve. So if we want to go into the introduction through the next scheduled events.
Sounds good.
Yeah, can you just, okay. If you enjoyed today's webinar, we hope you'll consider attending the next scheduled events, which are next Friday, the 16th. We are presenting the following: new talent acquisition at noon and configuration console IPA deep dive at 1 o'clock. If you're interested in attending and would like to register, you can visit our website or you can email me, brian.waters@balesllc.com. And as a closing note, Steve, if you just want to go to the Coffee with Consultant offering. We wanted you to be aware of our Coffee with Consulting offering. If you have any questions about what you saw today or any questions related to the info products, please reach out to us via our website or my email at brian.waters@balesllc.com, and we will connect you with a consultant who will spend a half hour with you at no charge over coffee, tea, or whatever your beverage choice may be, and they will answer any questions you have related to the N4 system. Thank you for attending today's presentation, and we look forward to speaking or meeting with you sometime soon. Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you, guys.